There we go. Awesome. So, Candy, I'll get Candy's questions up quick.
All right.
And where is she? There she is. And go from there. Okay, and you'll have to let me know if Tara yells from the background. If she needs to get in.
All right.
Okay. So we are here live right now with Mike VanPortfleet of LYCIA. Am I saying that right? Probably
That is
not.
correct.
Oh,
Nice to hear someone say it right.
oh, sweet.
Over the years, people have called it a lot of different things, mostly LYCIA.
Hmm.
And I've been told by numerous people that that's the way it's pronounced. And I said, well, wait a minute here. That's the way you pronounce a name, but LYCIA as a band is pronounced LYCIA. You can make assumptions of what we named it after, but it is LYCIA. LYCIA.
There we go.
Yep.
Awesome. And now I know, because for 20 years I was just like, I assume I'm saying this right, but I never heard anybody else say it.
Well, you
So,
say it right, and I'm always doing stuff like that, coming up with stuff where you can't define it. The perfect example is we have an album called Estrella with two L's, the Spanish word, and then we created a side project called Estrella and spelled it differently. So when I refer to Estrella, there's just the natural confusion there, and I don't know why I do those things, but I just do.
I have a character named that I pronounce it Lamia. It's technically a Greek word for vampire. So it's Lamia, I believe. But I'm like, that just sounds lame.
It's your
I'm gonna call it
character. You
Lamia.
can name it what you want, and it can pronounce it what you want.
Exactly. So every time somebody says it, I'm like, yeah, go with it. I just made it up as a name. So, but let's talk about the name because I've always been curious. How did you come up with Lycia?
It's an interesting story. First of all, you have to understand there's the LYCIA history, and then there's the real LYCIA history. Um, According to everything that I've said over the years, I started LYCIA in 1988, but in reality, I started LYCIA in 1981. But I just did not have frontman leadership abilities at that point. So I found it easier just to join other people's bands, be the guitar player, and go back after practices and after shows and just have my side and my solo project um, that I was too afraid to push forward until the late 80s. But through the 80s, I had my side and solo project, and there was a lot of different names I used, and one of them was LYCIA, spelled a little bit different, LYCEA. And it's reflective of the time. In the very early 80s, I saw a movie called Erga Music War, and a lot of the bands I liked from the time were in it. Gary Newman, Gang of Four, and Echo and the Bunnymen. Well, when their segment starts out, you see it, and it says the Lyceum. Being the naive person I was at the time, I just assumed that cool post-punk bands played at this club, and so I used to refer to the kind of music I wanted to do as Lyceum music. And so one of a number of names I used for my side project was LYCIA, just one, but I never really got it going until the late 80s. And when I decided to push ahead and finally do my side project, I wanted something to be Greek or Roman, big interest area of mine. And I was looking through some old maps, and I saw the word Lycia spelled differently. And
Yeah.
I thought, there you go. That's the name of the band.
And
So there's sort of the real history and then the alternate history, and just like what we started, there's a lot of gray area with me and names and time frame and whatever.
that's awesome though. And for the unfamiliar, so I actually have listened to Mike's band for a long, long time. This was off of Project Records. They are still around, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I was worried that they were like gonna go the fate of Cleopatra or something.
No, actually, Project's doing really well, especially with their ambient music.
Awesome.
They do a lot of stuff with Steve Roach still, and they do really well. And we did our album in Flickers with Project, and
That was a great song. Oh my God.
yeah,
The
that
fantastic.
That album is my favorite
Yeah.
LYCIA album. I think that's where everything
Yeah.
just clicked for me. I finally got all the level of control that I finally wanted and did my unusual mixes, and it just clicked really well. But yeah, project's still doing well.
Nice. I'm
They're going
really
along.
glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, I saw that my friend Ethan is in Black Tape for a Blue Girl now.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, oh wow. It's like, watching the evolution of everything over the past few years now that I've kind of dropped out of the scene. So it's like, oh, okay, everything's still moving. Cool.
Yeah.
So one of Candy's questions is, so she wanted to know, what's your favorite gig that you've played?
There's a few that would be probably tied. The very first official show in 1993 here in Arizona, some people recruited me to play this show called Night of Beautiful Noise. I was completely not ready. I wasn't a live ready musician at the time, and I was the only member of LYCIA at that time. But they hounded me until I finally said yes. And they even pawned off one of their musicians on me, Dave Gallis, who they were all moving in a shoegaze direction, and he was a keyboard player. They're like, hey, you should work with this guy. He can help you out with the show. And little did they know, he's exactly what I was looking for. So he came aboard, and we played this show at this, it was a big disco here in Scottsdale. And most of the bands on the bill were shoegaze oriented. We were sort of the odd band out. And we really used it to our advantage, because I remember we got there and the light guy and the sound guy came up and said, we're asking all the bands what they want. And the most of the bands were saying, just mix our sound good and put a blue light on us. And I went to the sound guy, the light guy, and I said, make it look like a UFO is landing. I want the lights to just go nonstop. I want it to be chaotic. And I want the whole club to be filled with smoke. And I told the sound guy, we're playing an instrumental song. And we played one 20-minute piece, Last Thoughts Before Sleep, which is on the live album. And I told the sound guy to turn this up as loud as you can. So after a series of, nice reflective shoegaze bands, we showed up, and it was literally like a UFO didn't land. It was loud. It was crazy. And there was, I don't know, maybe 600 people there. And we just got this just amazing response. It was so loud that a cord fell from the ceiling into the middle of the dance floor while we were playing. So we set the bar high with our first show. So that was one of my favorite shows. Another favorite show of mine was the last LYCIA show from that era, which was at Irving Plaza in New York City, where we co-headlined with Black Tape for a Blue Girl. And it was a difficult time for us because I was going through some serious health problems at the time. In fact, I remember seeing one of the reviews of that show, and they said that, Mike VanPortfleet at LYCIA showed up on stage wearing corpse makeup. Nope, I was just very sick, very, very sick. But nevertheless, the show went really well. We sort of knew it was going to be the last show of that era, and so we were really hoping that it went well. And as New York City always has been for, they accepted us so well, and the shows always went so well in New York. I love New York City, the best music city in the world, and I feel very fortunate that we've had some really good opportunities playing at some of the best venues there. Roseland Ballroom and Irving Plaza being the two big daddy ones.
Yeah, I've spoken to you guys at Roseland back in '95. I showed up, reasons I was late because of a friend of mine, so I missed your set, and I came in halfway through Electric Hellfire Club during the Typo show.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so mad because I went to see the band and I didn't even get to see them. So
that was a difficult tour for us. And when we played some of the earlier shows in places like Syracuse and New London, Connecticut, we were ready to bail from that tour. We weren't used to being abused, which is, I mean, it's called paying your dues. But
yeah,
we had never been in a situation like that. But we hung it out, and then the two cities that really saved it for us was first Boston, and then New York City. And New York City was amazing. I mean, you know what
Oh yeah.
ballroom is like. It's this amazing,
It's
amazing
not there
venue.
anymore.
It's not?
They tore it down.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
shame.
that was a beautiful
Beautiful.
place.
I remember there was a little bar off the side, and it reminded me of The
Yeah,
Shining with the lighting. Oh,
exactly.
I really thought that was cool. And we played that show, and you know, thank God New York is New York, because you know, we weren't playing in front of a bunch of metalheads in Syracuse that wanted to kill us. We were playing in front of sophisticated New York music fans, and they really were open-minded and gave us a shot, and they liked us.
And that was a
it was
wild.
that right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would
that
be
that.
another show up towards the top
Yeah.
for me. And then the last show I'd put up at the top would be Mexico City.
Oh,
Mexico
nice.
City's amazing. The fans there are they're music fans. They love music. They really do love music. And so we had an opportunity to play down there. So those are probably the ones that off the top of my mind. You know, there's probably a few other here and there, but you know, we never got to that next level. So touring was always an adventure. We never knew from night to night if we were going to sound good or bad. It sort of depended on the club we were playing and the sound system. And you know, back in the 90s, people weren't used to the technology that we use. Now you go, it's status quo.
Yeah.
All the bands are out there with pre-recorded stuff and sequence stuff. But I mean, we were literally playing in rock and roll clubs a lot of times, and they would see the drum machine and they'd be like, "Oh, no way, not one of these bands again."
I've been to places like small venues that have the monitors and everything like they are going to be, you know, Shea Stadium, and I'm like, whoa, you're gonna have a bad time. Like, bring those levels way down.
Yeah,
But
especially with a band like us with all the reverb.
yeah,
I mean, the joke for us in the 90s was that our extra member was feedback, because I mean, I literally just walked to the microphone. I wouldn't even say anything. The feedback would start. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I haven't
yeah,
even sang yet. And it's already feedback.
and the bass too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of bass. So that's actually another question that we had was where did you get your distinctive sound from? Because it's not like anything else out there. Still to this day, it's not really like anything else out there.
It probably has a lot to do going back to my side and solo project ideas. I'm a very aloof person, and I didn't come up like most musicians where you go and you meet other people and you jam. I just started playing in bands and started developing my ideas. Then I met up with John Fair in 1982, and he was a kindred spirit. And I think through the 80s, mostly what we did is we tried to imitate our favorite bands. And it's probably why we never had any success. We were just fans, and we just did what we did. But in the late 80s, I really think the key was the 4-track recorder. Once I got a 4-track recorder, John and I started recording, and very early on, this different type of sound came up, and we immediately started imitating ourselves. We'd write a song saying we want this song to sound like a song that the previous song we wrote. It just fed on itself, and eventually we developed this sound, and I've continually we're influenced by what we've done before, and so it's like a tree branch that's gone off, and it just keeps on going off. But besides that, I really don't know what it is. I play
Cool.
guitar effects. We just do it. I don't know where that sound comes from. It just is what it is, and I don't really. We're not trying to do anything but just play music. It's my bad attempt to be a post-punk band, I guess.
Whatever you did, it's working. So keep it up. And so Candy wanted to know what your favorite song to play is. And I guess, you know what, before we answer that question, I should let everybody know Candy in true Mad Dog style. Those who have followed mine and Candy's adventures know that Candy's nickname is Mad Dog, because one time she got into the middle of a dog fight and had to get rabies shots. So,
okay. Right.
as one does. So her nickname is Mad Dog, and I'm pretty sure the folks at the ER know her at this point because it's like the totally crazy misadventures of Candy. So tonight, she somehow, like, Candy smashed a glass in her hand and cut her thumb open, and it was bleeding a lot. And so the joke was that, she was going to duct tape it back together. We were going to do the show, and then she'd go after to go to the ER. And she walked down the stairs to go have help to tape it up, and all of a sudden she starts doing one of these deals, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "No." So she's in the ER getting her thumb stitched.
That sounds fun.
It's fun in retrospect. Like
Yeah.
once she gets out of the ER and she's back and we can laugh and talk about it, it's fun.
Yeah.
At the time, it's like, man, you're dripping blood all over the floor. Stop that.
Yeah. All right.
And Tara is unable to get into the room, and it's Facebook Live, so
Hey,
I'm sad.
we'll carry it.
Yes. So Candy wanted to know what your favorite song to play was.
All right. Well, we played it a lot in the early days. Stopped later, but I always loved playing Pygmalion from Start Corner. I just felt that felt symphonic to me, and it just built up to this chaotic end, and I just loved just playing the minimal guitar at the beginning and then just going off at the end and just hearing everything just space out. I loved playing that. Maybe Distant Fading Star from Australia was always fun. Just it had a big build up on it. I'm not going to say any songs with vocals, just primarily because most of the time we played, as soon as I stepped up to the microphone, there was feedback, and so it was frustrating to me. But for the songs with vocals, I always liked playing the Body Electric. That just seemed like a real, I could really click into that mood. Lately, well, we haven't played any shows. We've done some taped performances from home. I've really been enjoying doing the acoustic stuff, not depending on effects, and just going back to the old days and it just being about performing. I really enjoyed playing the wide variety of songs. I don't think I have a particular favorite from the acoustic stuff. And we're going to be doing quite a bit more of that in the upcoming.
I don't know if you can see the emojis flying along.
I do not see
okay.
that. Well,
If you guys are out there, give us some hearts to let us know you're here and listening. We're doing a pulse check. Are you guys alive out there? But yeah, I saw the ones that you did. It looked like your living room.
Yeah, we do everything in our house. We got lights in our house. Year round, we have lights in our house. It's just the way it goes. Yeah.
It's awesome.
So we just pick a part of the corner of the house and do the show. In fact, let's see if I can do this real quick here. You can see over in that corner there on the wall.
Uh-huh. Hey, it's the album cover.
There you go.
Nice.
We tie everything into our everyday life.
Awesome.
Really.
Awesome.
Just try to make our world here and pass it on to the albums.
Yeah, that's awesome though. And so Candy had, who, live or dead, would you like to sit down and talk to?
That's good. Ian Curtis of Joy Division, Jim Morrison of the Doors. I two of my heroes. I just picked those. I mean, you have Jim Morrison, and both of those guys I can relate to because I've often explained what I do is this tug of war between this gloom and doom existential vision and this escapist mysticism. That seems like Jim Morrison wrapped up right there. And I think one of the biggest compliments that I saw in a review was when Ionia first came out. I think the magazine was called, I think it might have been the Alternative Press review of it. And the writer said that he compared LYCIA's song Desert to Jim Morrison and Carlos Castaneda. And I thought, yes, that is the angle that I come from, this mysticism stuff. But I'm also a dark spirit too, can drift off into that existential George Orwell, Franz Kafka territory too. So,
Kafka gets dark.
Yeah. So my heroes are people that probably also go back and forth between those two territories.
So,
and I would really go ahead.
Oh, we've got people commenting. So Atrax says, listening to Mike's voice so clear and light, I can't imagine him singing so dark and sinister as his voice. Can you imagine if in this moment ask Mike to sing any stanza of the Ionia song?
Well, normally I wouldn't do this. I'm too shy. I can't do that. I need to have, maybe if I had an instrumenter here or something,
Maybe
but I don't know. But
next time.
Yeah, maybe next time. Maybe after I drink a little bit.
There we go. We'll keep it going.
Who knows?
We'll keep it going. I'll go grab a glass of Jack. You go drink your beer. Maybe we'll get karaoke going.
I'm the guy that at work am afraid to go to the meetings and talk, but I don't have a problem with the band going on stage. And I don't mind singing when I have a guitar, but yeah,
I've got.
Maybe I'll grab a guitar.
There you go.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe Tara can bring it. They're like, please.
I could maybe play a little something later, but
Tara says, "Do you?"
I don't think it would be Ionia. But in terms of the question, I mean, I think about the same thing when I see bands that I like, and then you see them do an interview, and you're just like, oh wow, that's not what I was expecting. It's come with LYCIA the whole time. People have shown up to our shows, and I don't know why they always thought this, because I've never pushed having any kind of image. I've always sort of been anti-image. I've just been what I am. But there was always this perception in the early 90s, in the mid 90s when we toured, that we were like a real hardcore goth band. And I've seen the look of disappointment so many times on people's face when we show up, and they're like, so you're LYCIA?
Yep.
Oh, here comes Tara. I need the stand, actually.
I'll bring the stand.
All right. All right, well, here's the guitar.
Woo! And it's that kind of party now.
A little backstory on this. This is a classical guitar. I always used to play just a regular acoustic guitar with a pick. I always felt like maybe I wasn't really a guitar player because I didn't know how to finger pick, and I didn't know how to really play a classical guitar without a pick. But I made it my mission the last year to never use a pick. So, little out tune. Now what I'll do is, initially I'm just going to give you a little preview of some material that we're working on.
Oh, sweet.
Can you hear this fine?
Great.
Just a little excerpt of a new song, moving into styles that maybe are definitely digging the flamenco direction.
Yeah, it sounds almost like the romanza, with the Spanish romanza.
Yeah, I've just totally I've always been into Spanish music, always. I've always been into exotic scales. From the very beginning, LYCIA was influenced by Mid-Eastern scales, Egyptian scales, Spanish scales. I've never been influenced by Western scales. I have zero blues in my background, and maybe that explains why LYCIA has a sound. on a personal level, I just gravitate towards the exotic scales, and I still
Nice.
do. And now that I'm just doing the stuff on the acoustic guitar, I if I could get away with doing everything in the Spanish style, I probably would. As some of our live videos where we envision songs like Estrella and Pray in a more Spanish style. I just find it's more fun to play. It's instead of thinking about the parts, you just get lost in the rhythm of it all, and it flows a lot better. So I think some of the material that we're working on now for whatever happens in 2021 will definitely have that involved, and that's one of the songs actually.
That's awesome.
So maybe a little bit later I'll pick it up and maybe sing a little bit too. But
And so I think Atrax is having a crisis of realization. But he's or she, I'm not sure. But watching you talk like a very normal guy indeed, and then seeing live is making their day. So
remember earlier in the pre being live, I talked about LYCIA being blurry.
yeah.
LYCIA functions blurry a lot better because back in '95 we did Burning Circle and Dust, which was probably our most commercial album at that time, not by design, just it just happened. And we were doing lots of touring. I made the decision that I would be more accessible to the press. So every show we played, I was doing interviews, phone interviews for the next city. We even did I know this sounds bizarre, but when we were in Mexico City, we did a press conference. We were shuffled around, and us with the members of Love Spirals Downward and the other bands playing the show, we were just led around Mexico City, and they brought us to this place and said, go in there and sit down. We walk in this room, and when I'm walking in the room, I see this long table with all these pictures of water. Like, what's going on here? I walk in, there's television cameras and about 40 people from the press. So we end up doing this press conference in Mexico City. We get back to the hotel, all the people are like, we just saw you on national television. I'm like, what? Yeah, so
Jane is saying that you used to live by her, but she hadn't heard of you yet.
okay.
Jane Drahos.
Where at? In here in Arizona or Ohio?
I don't know. Arcanta. Oh, okay.
Arcanta.
Yeah.
That's the other band that played that show. Yeah.
Yeah, Tara's moderating for us.
All right. She's got a crisper memory of stuff.
Yeah, this is wild. I'm having my own little moment right now, so this is kind of cool. But let's see. Candy's got some more questions. So she says that when she listens to some like certain ones of the songs, she kind of gets this like elsewhere vibe in her consciousness. And is there any music that does that for you, where it kind of brings you up into almost a transcendental meditation-esque plane?
Yes, that's what got me into music to begin with. Actually, I remember riding around in the late '60s when I was a kid with my parents' car, and you'd hear like a song like "Light My Fire" by the Doors, or "White Rabbit" by Jefferson Airplane, or "I Can See for Miles" by the Who, and it took me to places, and it changed me. And from the time I was a kid, I was always obsessed with the feeling of a place and a time. I obsessed over it. In fact, it not only led to me to doing music, but it led me to what I do in the real world, which is geography. Just this obsession with time and place and essence. And so there's tons of music that takes me to that place, from the stuff I listened to as a kid. Tons of post-punk bands. I mean, you think about the end of songs like "In a Lonely Place" by New Order, or "Dumbwaiter" by Psychedelic Furs, where it just goes off into this spacey, there's sounds bouncing off of everywhere. In fact, that's when back to when I was in my early bands, and I always talked about my side and solo projects. I remember telling the people I worked with that I wanted to be in a band that sounded like intros, extras, and breaks. I wasn't interested in the song. I just wanted the spacey parts, and that's what I wanted to do. And I guess, I guess that's what I ended up doing. Just
said geography. Tell us about geography, because I don't remember anything talked about as far as geography go in all the interviews I've seen.
Well, it's because it's my job, and I mean, in the real world, if I could have the perfect scenario, I would never touch geography again. I mean, everyone has to have a job. I mean, music. We made a living from music for a short time, but I mean, you end up going to work, and so I have a job in geography. I make maps, and it's still a job. And so when I was in college, I liked geography because you would study places that seemed far away and exotic, but once you get to the real world, man, the real world kills that kind of passion. They boil it all down into just, whether it's making money or whatever. And so you just go in and you do your job and try to find your little victories in it. But when I'm at work, I go for walks at my lunch. I think about music. I don't think about geography.
I hear you. That's actually why I got out of corporate and went into academia, because I just couldn't do corporate anymore. It was, the money was great, but it wasn't here.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
And let's see, we got more questions in the chat. So Atrax is back. Which LYCIA record satisfies you most? What's your favorite record? Your favorite LYCIA record?
In Flickers. I love In Flickers because In Flickers is what every LYCIA album should have been. Outside influences can creep in and change how you do an album, and my own personal insecurities often would creep in and lead to me making some decisions that I regretted later. But within Flickers, we have nothing, we've already had our heyday in the 90s. So, and I was pretty convinced that after A Line That Connects, that I didn't think we really had anything else to say. And I was like, okay, A Line That Connects is a good album. This would be a good way to just end things. And Flickers just came about, and I recorded in ways that seemed completely untraditional. And I remember when we were working on the album, I'd get that sort of skeptical email back from Dave Gallis, like, "Are you sure this is going to work?" And I said, "Trust me. Wait till we get it all done." And so I had all these different sources. John Fair was sending me these 80s sounding electronic stuff, and Dave was sending me this really heavy stuff, and I was working on acoustic stuff that I initially envisioned that was going to be sort of in the lines of tripping back into the Broken Days. And then when I was mixing it, I was like, I don't really care if anyone likes this. I'm making this for myself. And I took all the chances in terms of the production that I always wanted to do with all the other albums, and I did it this time, and it worked. And for that reason, it's my favorite album. From the 90s, if I had to pick a favorite album from that era, it would be Cold, because Cold is everything that we worked on finally clicked in every way with Cold, which is sort of ironic because the band was falling apart when we recorded it. And shortly after we finished, we just couldn't work together anymore. But the album as a whole works. And so those are my two favorite albums from each era.
They're great albums. I love the guitar in Flickers, because it sounds almost like you opened up a grand piano or like an old upright grand and started plucking the strings. And it's just such a neat effect.
Yeah, It's funny because I get people emailing me quite often asking me, how do you have the LYCIA effects sound? And I can never give them a good answer because the sound isn't the effects, it's my playing, because I constantly change my effects. The effects that I use on Inflickers were a completely different set of effects than I used on the Line That Connects, and light years away from the effects that I used on Cold and the Burning Circle. I'm always changing the effects that I use, just trying to create an atmospheric sound with whatever I have at the time. So I'm glad to hear that your perception of Inflickers, because I really wanted to change up what the guitar
Oh, it's
sounded like
fantastic.
on that album.
It's probably my favorite album to date as well. I mean, honestly, like I love all the albums because, you know, when I need to get in that headspace to write, it's like I need to put it simply, I need to be in an empty warehouse that's half falling in on itself. And so it kind of all brings that vibe back because
Mm-hmm.
I started listening back in the 90s and I wrote, you know, my first 3 novels there. And then I listened to all those albums while I was writing. So as soon as I'm back in that headspace, it's right there again. It's like scent and memory.
Hmm.
Except it's auditory and memory. So it's very awesome to get back into that headspace again and to have it change because it's not the same headspace. It's a little different and there's different details to it this time around. Um, so we got, let's see. Tara says I should ask you about ancient astronaut theory.
Hey, I mean, it's since
Oh,
you're
okay,
interested. I mean,
cool.
I don't really know if my interest area in that is not really like ancient aliens. I'm not like ancient alien theorists say it's this. What I find interesting in all that is what my real interest area is: ancient speculative archaeology, um, civilizations that could have been here in a time where people still felt that humans were hunter and gatherers. I really do believe that there was a earlier civilization, and there are remnants of that. I don't really know. That's a whole subject altogether. I mean, it's a subject matter that crept into aspects of quiet moments. The whole Greenland, Antarctica um, themes tie into that, but I find it hard to explain that stuff because I remember after Quiet Moments came out, I did a interview with someone, a guy from Pitchfork, and I started to explain all that stuff, and I realized that about maybe a minute into my explanation, I was just sounding like a rambling, nonsensical idiot, and I had to just cut it off because it just, you know, when it comes to that stuff, I like to keep the abstract in the whole concept of like, I don't need to understand everything, and thus I don't need to explain everything. It's just an interest area of mine, and I do think that there are a lot of ancient mysteries that would probably all blow our minds, but most people tend to think when you talk about that stuff, they just think you're some new age Atlantis type person, and it's not that way. I
Ooh.
see a lot of, you know, was it Göbekli Tepe is proof in the pudding right there that those doors are starting to open, and I think that we're gonna, you know, in the coming years, maybe not in my life, they're gonna discover some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think you need to join Candy and me again because this is like our typical train of thought is we start off talking about shiny rocks and we end up talking about quantum physics
Yeah,
somehow.
I'm all about that. I mean, I think about dimensional stuff all the time. Dimensional stuff is all through the music, and it's really quite prevalent on it. Flickers actually, you know, the
Yeah.
song "The Path,"
Mhm.
the song "She" is all about that. You know, I
Yeah.
can tell you about it if you're interested. It's sort of
Sure.
strange, but
Grab another beer and we'll get another song going later too.
the song "She," it's it goes back to when I was when I was young, my family moved all the time. I mean, nonstop. I mean, I went to so many different schools, and by the time I got to high school, I was just checked out. You know, why try to make friends when you know that you're just going to be moving on? So I really started looking inward, and I think because of that, you know, you become an isolated person, and you know, there's a certain amount of loneliness comes into all that. And when I was in high school and in college, I used to have this recurring dream. It's sort of like a sleep paralysis dream, but instead of being negative, it was comforting. I'd have this dream of a presence that was in my room, but instead of being frightened, it was like comforting, you know, because my life was always in a certain sense of change and upheaval. And so I guess my subconscious was telling me, you know, you just want to have comfort. And I never really thought about that dream. It was a recurring dream. Sometimes the presence was just abstract. Other times it would be like a female figure. But it was always abstract. And maybe a couple years ago, I had the dream again. And when I woke up and I was like trying to think about the dream, and because I'm so interested in all this dimensional stuff, I started to think about this concept in this half awake, half asleep stage of an isolated, lonely person being visited by an alternate version of themselves from another dimension, comforting each other. And the she in that song is an alternate of myself that's female, that comes from, like in sleep, the dimensions, you lower your walls down, the dimensions cross for a brief time, they come together, comfort each other, and then you wake up and you go back to your life. That's what that song's about.
Nice. That's
So,
awesome.
you know, I often wondered when people read the lyrics if they would, you know, they would come up with their own definition. They probably didn't come up with that definition.
Sometimes a painting's just a painting. Sometimes there's more to
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Let's see. So we've got, tell us about Bleak and Dust, your side projects.
We'll go about Dust
Okay.
first. In the mid 90s, I tell you, I don't know. I mean, we were so ambitious at that point. And we were just kicking out so much material. And from the time the Start Corner tour ended in 93, Dave Gollis and I went in the studio, and we basically stayed in the studio for almost a year and a half. We did the Bleak album, we did the double album Burning Circle and Dust, and then aside from that, I started working with John Fair again for the Dust Project. And it got to the point where we just couldn't release everything. I had to talk Project into doing the Bleak album on top of the Burning Circle, but we were just kicking out so much stuff. The Dust Project was me just wanting to reconnect with John Fair again and writing songs that were more like what we did in the 80s. It sort of was there. It was sort of a morph between what I was doing in the mid 90s and that. And in terms of the Bleak album, I wanted it to be a LYCIA album. I wanted to follow Start Corner with the two paths that were sort of being dictated by that album. One was a really noisy, hectic, inward-looking, crashing, sort of the existential side, and the other part was I was doing a lot of writing on the acoustic guitar, and I wanted it to be more reflective and airy and maybe more mystical. So I didn't think that the two directions I was going in would really work on one album. And so I decided that it might be interesting to just really concentrate more style-wise on each direction. And so that's what we did. With Bleak, it's sort of, it's a strange album for me because I see it as almost two different releases pushed together, because Dave and I had just started working together, and he has his style and I have my style, and I'm not really sure if we married those styles together as we did later on Cold. So I don't really know what I think about Bleak. I know there's a couple songs on there, but to me it really felt like an album where we were just getting to learn how to work with each other in the studio. And Dust was never really truly finished. We came up with some ideas. It was going to be much more. I was probably going to sing on it, but I mean, there was just so much going on. We had to just, something had to give, and that was what gave, because I mean, Burning Circle was, to me, it looked like it was going to be maybe the album that gave us that next step. I mean, everything was being set up at that time with the way Project was growing and the amount of press attention we were getting, and there were some catchy songs like Pray and Where's All the Time Gone. I really thought, maybe this will be the album that takes us to that next level. We never got to that next level. We just sort of got to that edge and just flailed there until it finally just completely fell apart in the late 90s. But there's a couple of Dust songs I really like a lot, and they were actually fun songs to play live too. Back to an earlier question, Tara and I did a show in Cleveland. It was at end of December 1996. We didn't do a lot of shows that year, but we were setting ourselves up for touring in 97. And we decided that we were going to do a Dust show. Of course, the club advertised it as a LYCIA show. So we went out and did this instrumental show, and half the songs we played were the Dust songs, and it was a fun show to play. It was very dynamic, and those Dust songs really worked well live. But yeah, it's just one of a number of things that we started and never finished. We just had too many things going on at the time.
And they say, Mike, Bleak is not strange, believe me. Bleak's a wonderful gem, a truly masterpiece from darkness, mystery, life, decadence, everything. Feel yourself proud of Bleak.
Well, thank you. I do really like the song The Boiler Room. I think that is what I wanted the whole album to sound like. I wanted it to sound like somebody was trapped in a factory, that there was really no hope and any kind of happiness, sort of a Winston Smith type of character of just going home and drinking his greasy Victory gin and hiding from the wall that's spying on him. But I think that we just had, I think about that actually a lot, and I sort of think that maybe it might have been in our best bet to maybe have Burning Circle be just the guitar-based stuff from disc 1 of the Burning Circle, and then create like a electronic album that took the best of disc 2 of the Burning Circle and the best of Bleak. But I mean, we were so ambitious then. We were just like, let's just do as much as we possibly can, and we're just moving full force ahead. So I'm glad people like Bleak album. I know that a lot of people have told me over the years that they really dig that album, but I go back in flickers. I wish I could have a redo and go back in time, and I think that if we could re-envision it, people might have a different perception. It might be something they might like a little bit better. But hey, it is what it is. I know that there are bands that I like, and they remake some of their old songs or remix their albums, and I'm like, hell no, I don't want that. Give me the original. I want the original before it was remastered, and so I try to keep that into account when I talk about my music, because I know that something I might not like, other people are passionate about. So I try to temper what I have to say, because I don't want to rain on their parade.
Well, Attract says, please finish Dust someday, please.
I don't even know how I could finish it, because I mean, that was a long time ago, and unfortunately all the tapes are goners. They're just, yeah, I don't even know how I could remix that. But taking that into account, Dust was John Fair and me. Well, me and John Fair are working together again, so we have material that we're working on right now, including the song we just finished right now is a remake of a synth-oriented song that we wrote in 1989. Nice. And so we have 3 songs ready for whatever we're going to do in the future. One was that flamenco song I played earlier. Another song is down a completely different guitar-based direction, and then we have a synth piece where I think we're going to take the variants of In Flickers and just try to carry it on to another album or an EP more likely an EP of the same type of vibe.
And you can't see it right now, but we are getting flooded with hearts and smiles.
It's nice. It's nice because I feel immensely fortunate that LYCIA's had the opportunity to have the second life, because in the late 90s things died. I mean, within a year we went from you can't do anything wrong to you can't do anything right, and LYCIA just died, went away. The interest seemed to be gone, and thanks to Rich at Handmade Birds for talking me into coming back by reissuing Cold on vinyl. It exposed us to this whole brand new scene of bands and a wide variety of styles that it was invigorating to me. I almost feel as though LYCIA came around at the wrong time. Either we needed to be around in the 80s or we needed to be around in this last decade. It's where we're most tuned to. But in typical LYCIA fashion, everything is always out of sync and out of time. And we came out at a time when dark Orient music was really looked at negatively. In the late 80s, all the great post-punk bands had all become very, very commercial, tinny sounding new wave bands, and people didn't really dig that kind of music anymore. And then here comes LYCIA. Yeah, wrong time. But then we functioned in that scene in the 90s, which was small, but it was a healthy scene, and very supportive of us. But at the late 90s, we fell off the radar. I mean, the music scene was moving towards more dancey music, and we were slow motion LYCIA, and I still remember very clearly, like 98, we'd go to any record store, there was LYCIA in the listening station in the bins. And I also remember 1999, where everything was gone. The bins were gone. LYCIA was no longer stocked in the store. I'd see bad reviews, negativity, and it was just like, oh my gosh, how did things spin in this negative direction so badly? And it was one of the reasons why in the 2000s I was AWOL. I was just like, screw all these people. They turned on me, and they don't want nothing to do with LYCIA anymore, so I'm not going to do music. And I sort of went on a music strike. And it wasn't until the end of the decade that Tara and I did Fifth Son. And when we did Fifth Son, I wasn't even going to release it. We thought about putting it under another name and just making it available free, just so that we could do music again. And it didn't really take off. It really was with the Cold reissue and doing Quiet Moments on Handmade Bird, where things just shot right up again. And so we feel immensely fortunate. Sometimes we're a little afraid that maybe we're overstaying our welcome on this second run. Because we felt like we overstayed our welcome in the 90s, and it wasn't pleasant at the end, and we were all it was discouraging. So we're trying
I think it was just the time.
Yeah.
Because everything kind of went chaotic, like into the 2000s, and everybody just kind of got knocked off their feet.
Yeah.
And everybody that thought they had stable jobs and everything else, suddenly it's all out the window by 2005. And now it's finally like starting to, sort of kind of stabilizing again. But we've got more time to stay home now too. Like, we've got time.
Yeah.
And it's something we never had before, just in general.
Yeah.
So now we can do things like this, where we've got the infamous and famous Mike VanPortfleet talking live with us, having a beer. Tara's moderating the chat for us, and we've got a bunch of people sending all the hearts out. And, it just amazes me how far we've come since the 90s. I literally went from writing to get info about how to order this cassette and sending $5 and then getting the cassette.
Yeah.
Which, I saved up all of the money that I was making at my Kmart job so that I could buy all the bands on this album, or this sampler. And then now all of a sudden it's like there's all this access to it. Whereas before, I grew up in rural mountainous PA. You want to talk about time tripping and vortexes and weird stuff. Candy and I just talked about weird Pennsylvania. Well, the weirdness of Pennsylvania. Yes, on one of our shows, but like, if I wanted to hear anything new that wasn't just run of the mill and hot adult contemporary coming out of Honesdale, Pennsylvania, I had to put my hand on the stereo and put my other one towards Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to hear music. So now it's like, I just told Tara this earlier today. I got the Apple Music, $10 a month thing, so that I catch up on the last 35 years of music. I was like, I know I've missed stuff.
Yeah.
And Tara says, "Hi, Mom." So yeah, I don't think you're overstaying your welcome. I think you've built a house and you're moving in.
Anyone that's been around me knows that I'm this paranoid guy. I'm always afraid that tomorrow everything's gonna be gone and lost. And so
welcome to Gen X.
Yeah, it just, yeah, I just remember functioning in the 80s here in Arizona where no one gave a crap what we did. No one did. Me and John would be making this music, our early demos that I think still stand up pretty well, and no one cared. Our friends didn't care. Everyone was dismissive of us here. And then the way it played out in the 90s, where, I mean, when Start Corner came out, it was like I could do no wrong, and I was confused. I made all these mistakes and put all these really bad comp songs out because I was trying to make up for that lost decade of me being an underachiever and not getting music out. So my solution was just kick out as much stuff as you could in the 90s. And so every comp that asked me to be involved, I'd say, all right, well, I have this early version of this song, or I have this outtake, and I listen to that music now. I'm like, there's a reason why it was an outtake. There was a reason why it wasn't, because it wasn't ready yet. And I was so confused because I would put these songs out in comps and I'd be like, I don't really know. And people would be, it's great. And I thought, I don't hear it. So you get caught up in that you can't do anything wrong. And then the late 90s came, and I still remember, this actually goes into 2000 when we really released Tripping Back into the Broken Days. I thought, well, this is a very song-oriented album, and I feel pretty good about it. And then the reviews came out, and it was just like, people were ripping everything about it. And it was so frustrating because there was so much laziness in the press, in that the reviews of the album was nothing more than the project press release. So they're just taking the press release and putting it in there and then adding a couple snide comments at the end about a samey sounding goth band. And I'm like, what? This is acoustic guitar and ambient music. How is this a samey sounding goth band? And how is this sounding like what we did before? The album we did previous was an electronic album, Estrella. But yeah, I think we were just at that point pigeonholed as something, and it was just easier that the press was taking the easy way out, and they were very dismissive of that album, and it was very discouraging to us. And we're people like everyone else, and when you get a lot of criticism, you're just like, well, this is what you think, then fine, well, you can go do what you do and listen to what you want to, and we'll just go away, which is what we did.
Yeah, I feel that pain. I had done a book club guest appearance locally, and for the most part everybody liked the book except this one woman, and she was like 150. And she was like, well, I didn't like it. And all of a sudden everybody was like, dude, you don't be rude, and she's like, no. She's like, I read the whole thing just to make sure I didn't like it, and then Amazon wouldn't give me my money back. And I literally just laughed at her. And that infuriated her, and I'm like, sorry, but you don't eat the whole steak and then get your money back. So that's how I look at it. Do the stuff for you, do what you want to do, because you're going to have to do it either way. It's got to come out. And then if other people like it, they'll find you.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I find liberating about this second era of LYCIA is that when we came back to do music, it was for no more reason than just to be involved again. And we never entertained any thoughts that we were going to go back to make a living at it again. We just wanted to, it's important to us. We just wanted to do it again. And so this time around, there's no rules. We just do it what we want. And we're very open to experimentation. And, you know, as we move forward, I think we're just going to expand more and more. As a music fan, I like all kinds of music. I'm not one of these people that just focus in on one genre. I mean, just the age that I am, I've been into rock music since like 67 is the first year I remember listening to music. And, you know, I started buying records in the early 70s, and I've just been a music fan since. And to this day, I'm still enthused by a lot of new music. There's, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of really good stuff that came out from new bands. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of good stuff out there still.
Yeah. Goth is making a comeback finally. I don't know if it ever really went away. It kind of lurked in the background for a while, and now it's coming to the forefront again.
And
but
it's coming back in different flavors, which is what I like.
Yeah.
We went and saw a show from a band. I think it was a Drab Majesty show a few years ago, and I was looking around. There's all these people with mustaches, and they look different, but they were into the music. And I you know, it's cool having. I like the fact, like I said earlier, that there's it's a lot of different genres now. I mean, whether it's post metal or just experimental electronic, all these different styles are appreciative of each other. Back in the 90s, it was more, this is our scene, and we don't want anyone from the outside coming in or outside influences. But likewise, we don't want you to go outside of these boundaries. And
Yeah.
that's where we often suffered, because we would be thinking about, let's go and do this tour with this band or do this. And sometimes people felt like we were maybe being traitors to them, and it wasn't the case. We were just doing what we do and just wanted to make
but that Typo show, when I saw the lineup, because we were going to go see Typo Negative, and when I saw that you guys were on the ticket and Electric Hellfire Club, I was like, whoa.
The Misfits.
And then the Misfits made a surprise appearance. We didn't know about the Misfits yet.
So you think about wide variety. I mean, you can thank Peter for that.
Wild.
Peter, everything that's happening right now, Peter envisioned in the mid-90s. This is what he wanted. That's why he brought us and Switchblade Symphony on his tours. I had a conversation with him shortly before he passed, and he had this idea, you know, of forming some kind of super band that he wanted. This was his dream lineup. He wanted to get Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine and some guy from Red House Painters and me and him to do some kind of band. That's what he wanted to do as a side project. And I said, I'm in on that, but I don't think he ever approached anybody else about it. But when you think of that angle that he was coming from, and then you think of the music scene now, I mean, this guy, you know, pretty much married the different genres that are together now. He's responsible for it, because, I mean, before Typo Negative was doing that stuff, metal was metal, and you can't picture a metal band playing with a band like Cocteau Twins. It was oil and water.
Yeah.
He was the person that started it, and that's why when Handmade Birds approached me about doing something, and I was looking at their roster, it sort of blew my mind that there was all this variety of styles. And I thought, first thing I thought was, oh my God, this is what Peter envisioned back then.
Yeah.
I mean, he was more visionary towards that than I was. I was sort of more of a closed-minded. I just listened to atmospheric and ambient and post-punk music, and anything outside that I wasn't interested in. I realized how stupid that was, because there were a lot of good bands back then that were in different styles, and that's the territory that we try to occupy now. We just want to like good music, and I don't care.
It's all blending now. That's one thing that I really like with the latest, I guess for lack of a better term, I feel old sometimes when I go into like some of the Facebook groups for the goth stuff and they're referring to people as baby bats and elder goths, and I'm like, what?
What?
Dude, like, I got no time for this. Like, I'm just me, and can we just get on with the music and whatever and go from there? But seeing all these bands that are coming out, like the one band that I can't get into because I can't get past the grammar of their name, and it's the stupidest thing. It's the stupidest reason not to listen to them. Is She Passed Away. Can't do
Oh.
it. I can't. I'm like the editor in me is literally sitting there with a red pencil, like ready to cross it out. But the music's fine. I just can't get into it because of that thing
Yeah.
that grammar. But yeah, the other stuff that's coming out, it's this neat mishmash of now music with 80s music, with post-punk, with new wave, with ambient, and it's just all like together now, and I'm just like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's gonna be, I'm looking forward to the next 10 years. Knock
Yeah,
on wood.
I think the scene is healthier now than it was in the 90s. I first came about in the late 70s and early 80s when I started playing in bands. And I always felt that that period of time, like 79 to 83, was just so healthy. I remember going to buy records and you had to you couldn't, there were more records you wanted to buy than you had money for. So you had to choose. And then I think it went through a long phase where you could just go to the record store and there's a couple that you could buy, I think we're back at that. At least 5 years ago, we were back at that stage where there was just so much good stuff out there. You had to sort of pick and choose what you want. It's all over the place, whether it's Chelsea Wolf or whatever, Soft Kill, and just all these different bands, and you listen to them, and you're just, wow, this is amazing stuff. Why isn't this all over the bigger charts or whatever? And it's just, I think it's a way more healthy now, and I think it's because of these different styles that just move to the darker territories, and then kindred spirits gravitate together, and so you have all these music styles together now, and I think it's super healthy, and it has influenced what we've done. The new scenes have had a big influence on Inflickers.
Yeah, it's
I listen to all these young bands and thinking, wow, this is great stuff. Why would I not be influenced by that any more than I was influenced by Wire and Joy Division when I first started?
exactly. And it's like my playlist just grows and grows for all kinds of stuff. And now this is weird for me because I walk into the grocery store and I hear Sisters of Mercy and Fields of the Nephilim on the loud, on the stereo in the grocery store, and I'm just like, I'm sitting there, I'm bopping along before, I get about like halfway through the produce aisle before I realize, like, whoa, really?
Yeah.
In the middle of like South Central rural Pennsylvania, we've got Sisters of Mercy and Fields of the Nephilim on the speakers in the store. So I don't know how to take that. And then it comes on with like, you're listening to the oldies station. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
I was like, here we go, crone time. But oh yeah, for Attrax, it's not that I don't like their music. I just, I don't. It's the name. I can't get past the way that they spelled past. It's I write, so I'm constantly hearing this editor in the back of my head yelling at me for anything, and their name just it sets my internal editor screaming. So it's not that I don't like their music. It's my own personal demon. Nothing against them at all. So I think, do you have any questions you've always wanted to answer?
No, not that I can think of. I'm sure there probably is, but I can't think of anything right now. No, I can't really think of anything.
Yeah, well,
Any yeah, I don't know. Is there any questions coming in from people out there?
I'm gonna scroll back here through. Mostly just, everlasting love. So.
All right, let me think here. Let me think if there's any interesting story that I'd like to bring up. I can't think of it right now.
So, what is your funniest story from being on tour? What's the funniest thing that ever happened, or the weirdest thing that ever happened to you on tour? And we'll wait.
Uh,
While you tell that, if cracks can put their question into the comments.
well, I mean, there's tons of them. It's real hard to figure out, but this one just came to my mind. We were on Dave Gallis and I were doing the Start Corner tour, and we played this place in Fullerton. I forgot the name, Ipso Facto, I think it was, and it's a store, but in the back they had a little art space, and we played a show there, and it really went well. I mean, the thing I remember was that I think the Taco Bell next door called the police because there were all these people standing all over the place. It was really well attended. But after we played our show, they brought us up to the front to do a meet and greet, and so we were sitting behind the counter, and in the counter was like the jewelry and stuff they sold, and people were standing in line to come up to get our autographs and sign the CDs. Well, this person was standing there, and when they got up to the line, they asked me, they wanted to see some of the jewelry and have me take it out. They thought I worked at the store. They had no idea. They had zero idea what was going on. They didn't realize the band had just played and all these people were standing in line for a meet and greet. They just figured they were just going to wait their turn and have me help them to buy their jewelry. So that I don't know why that just came up in my mind, but there was another interesting story. I don't think this is funny. It's sort of frightening, actually. We played in North Carolina, in Charlotte, and we had there was this meet and greet party before we played at the people that were putting on the show's house, and there was this really weird dude that was there, and they told us to avoid the guy, and they said that his name was Meat.
Like
his name was Meat.
M-E-A-T?
Yeah, like meat, like M-E-A-T. And what it was is that they had these like S&M type shows at the goth clubs, and they would go up to the hills in North Carolina and find this guy Meat who lived up in the hills, and they'd bring him down because he would be a guy that they could hang on the wall and hit with a whip. But he was a very unstable dude, and when we were playing our show, I could see him in the front row looking at us, and he had a knife, and he was like doing this the knife, and he's giving us this weird look, and I'm thinking, is this guy gonna jump up on stage and stab me to death? And he had this crazy look in his face, and when we got done playing, he walked up and said, I enjoyed your show immensely. And then the security came and got him and took him out because they saw the knife, and that's the last we saw of Meat. And it probably, and we were all sort of afraid that might be the last anyone saw of LYCIA.
Oh my gosh.
But I mean, there was a lot of, that was sort of an extreme thing, but we definitely met a lot of strange people on tour.
That's so weird for a goth scene. I said that's so weird, meeting strange people in the goth scene.
Yeah. Well, the funny is, this guy was living in the hills. I have no idea what he was into, but I tell you what, he liked LYCIA. It was I guess our ambient sounds were keeping him calm.
There you go. Oh, and Atrax's question has come through. What was the main inspiration for you to sing in that way, so dark, low voice, like a kind of patient with a hard cough?
Well, I wish I had a great answer for that, but I guess when I answer this question, I think a lot of things are going to be cleared up. It's there's two answers really. One is that in the 80s, I was insanely insecure about my musical abilities. I always wanted to sing and sing my own songs, but I was so afraid to sing that when I was still in the early 80s, I was still living with my mom and my stepdad. They'd be out for the evening. I'd be the only person in the house, and I would still be embarrassed to sing. I was embarrassed hearing my own voice. And so I was so repressed that I was always sort of holding it back. Secondly, some of my earliest heroes were the psychedelic furs. Richard Butler. Think about how he sings. So I started out by trying to emulate his singing style in sort of a afraid to hear my own voice, hold back type of way. And when John and I were doing the early LYCIA demos, I was so petrified about hearing my own voice that I was literally completely holding back, and it caused me to have that really sort of gruff sound. And then it just evolved from there, and as I gained confidence in it, I just continued fostering that style because it sort of became my style. And after a short time, that just became the way that I sang. And now I can't sing any way but that. I just sort of trained myself to do it that way. But it was never an intention to be sinister or dark. It was just based on my own insecurities and just wanted to have that raspy Richard Butler style at first. Yeah.
It works.
Well, now the jig's up, I guess. Not quite as original as everyone thought. So don't ask me where my guitar style comes. Because now I'll have to tell that, and then everyone will be like, "Oh my God, LYCIA is just a ripoff."
Where's
Your
guitar style come from? Oh, so Tara says that you made Meat get his own beer at the meat street.
I did not understand the dynamics of that local scene. We were at this party, and this crazy guy comes over to me and says, "Give me a beer." I was like, "Get your own damn beer." Everyone just stopped and like, "Oh my God." And you know what he said? "Okay." He went and got his own beer.
That's kind of awesome.
That's when you're the people from the outside being, shuffled around every city. You show up and you're around a bunch of people you don't know, and everyone is familiar with you, but you don't really know what's going on, and you're sleep deprived, and you're just sort of led from here to there, and just function.
That was entertaining. We've got Jane says your voice is incredible.
Well, thanks, Jane. I struggle to this day. When we sit around and practice around here, I think to myself, I'm in my late 50s and I'm still fighting, trying to get confidence in my singing. Maybe I should just stop my quest to try to feel comfortable with it and just accept the fact that I still feel like I struggle with my vocals. Sometimes some days are better than others, but I was just recording vocals for the song I told you about a couple days ago, and I was really struggling. It just comes with the territory. There's never been an easy vocal take for me, ever. I just go it until I think it's passable, but sometimes I still cringe a little bit when I hear some of that early LYCIA material and think, "Oh my God."
I mean, it could be worse. It could be auto-tune.
I'm just the kind of person that will work on something until it's the way I want. So it might sound like it's flowing, but a lot of that stuff came from a lot of frustration and work. I mean, I would literally hole myself up in the home studio and work 16 hours straight just to try to get, a couple guitar takes down or something. And Tara would be in the other room hearing me throwing F-bomb after F-bomb, saying I'm going to quit, that I suck. And then just do it until, okay, wait a minute, I got it there. Okay, I'm good. Now on to the next song and the next set of frustrations. Yeah. No.
It's all good. It works. As the comments are showing, everybody says you have nothing to worry about.
That's impossible. I worry all the time. In every aspect of my life, I'm a paranoid freak. It's just the way it goes. In fact, if I wasn't, there wouldn't be a LYCIA. I'd probably just be this content guy working a job someplace. But the insecurities create the music, which generally I'm happy with, but it is what it just is what it is. It's not an easy, it hasn't been an easy journey, but I think that there are a handful of things that I've worked on that I'm proud of. There's a lot of stuff I don't like, and I won't tell people what I don't like. And I think some of the stuff I don't like, they would erupt. There's one album in particular that is a favorite of people's that I'm embarrassed by, and I wish I had a redo on it. But I won't say what it is, because if I did, they would be very upset. We'll just leave it at that.
I've rewritten books before because when I reread them and I was like, oh,
so you understand that pain.
Oh, I totally get it. Totally get it. It took me 13 years to release my first novel because I kept rewriting it.
So you also understand me spending the decade of the 80s hiding in my parents' house, afraid to hear my own voice. And then when my voice actually would squeak out of my mouth, I would literally stop and look at the dog like, are you making fun of me?
You're looking at me? I don't see anybody else here, so you must be looking at me.
I don't think it was until the late 80s where I think I felt, for the first time in my life, even though I bounced around a lot and didn't feel a lot of stability, I mean, I didn't feel completely out of sync with everything. By the late 80s, I felt desperate. Like, oh my God, I'm in my mid-20s now, and I've wasted all this time. And if I'm going to do music, I'm going to have to push forward. And I really pushed myself into a lot of uncomfortable situations for myself that eventually became normal, comfortable situations. But it really was that sense of desperation in the late 80s that led to LYCIA actually having a life. Otherwise, if I would have had a stable girlfriend at the time or something, there very well could not have been. LYCIA may not have ever been born. I might have just moved on to life and just whatever, played in some local band, and that would have been it. No one would ever heard any of my crazy side project ideas, my intro and extras.
So do you think now that you guys you're kind of making this, see, to me, you guys never went away. So I don't look at it as a comeback, more as a resurgence. Do you think that your son will join the band?
He's been on the albums, in Flickers, on the song Rewrite. He played a gong on it. We have this old gong in the house, and I brought it down and I said, "You want to play in the album? Hit it." So he listened to the song and he went bong, bong, bong.
That's awesome.
On the album. But I don't know. I'll let him make his own choice in life. He's actually, I bought him a guitar, a couple of ukuleles. It didn't really stick with him, but I did put my keyboard out, my old LYCIA quiet keyboard from the late 90s, and I have it set out there, and he started fiddling around with it. Lo and behold, he can play some songs from Star Wars. He can play songs from Avengers. Plays the Gravity Falls theme song. He's taught himself how to play.
That's awesome.
And I tried to encourage him to let his music teacher hear it, but he's bashful about it, so he won't do it. But if he follows his path with that, I see a natural talent. But I mean, if I followed my dad's dream right now, I'd be a professional bowler. And so I want him to find his own path and do his own thing. If he does music, I'll be there to support him. If he wants to be a professional bowler, I'll be there to support him. But he has leanings towards music, but he's a kid. And so
yeah,
let him find his own path in life, and we'll support him. So if he joins LYCIA, I don't know. I mean, we'll just wait and see. Who knows what the future holds. I try to function more on the immediate now, and right now we're just working on some new songs I'm pretty excited by, and we'll see where they go.
Awesome. Now, has he heard your stuff? I'm assuming he must have.
Oh yeah, he listens to it all the time.
Awesome.
He likes LYCIA. and I take it as a compliment because other bands that he likes the Chameleons, he
Good taste.
he likes Blue Oyster Cult, he likes the Who. So if he likes that stuff and he likes LYCIA, then I consider that a seal of approval.
He's on his way.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome taste. Oh, we got more comments here. So we got folks talking about their favorite albums now from LYCIA.
Good.
I'm hoping that that's not the one that embarrasses you.
No one will ever know. No one will ever know. Some secrets I just keep to myself.
And we've got a lot of excitement for new music going on. Count me amongst them. I'm excited. And he likes soft kill too, Tara says. So if there are no other questions, wow, time flew. It's almost 7:30.
Is it? Well, I guess to wrap it up, I want to tell you a little bit more about our plans this year.
Yeah, go for it.
We initially we're going to do a split 7-inch with either Soft Kill or one of their side projects, but since things are really taking off for them right now, we decided to just move ahead and maybe do our own single. So we recorded another song and we approached Funeral Party Records, a label that I'm pretty impressed with, and they showed interest in doing a single for us next summer. And then John Fair sent me some music to do the cover of Gary Newman's Our Friends Electric. And so me and John moved ahead with that, which just came out. For anyone that hasn't heard it yet, we just put that on Bandcamp. It's a Bandcamp exclusive. It's like what we like to do. It's free if you want it. It's pay what you want, but we encourage you to, if you want to take it for free, take it for free. We just want people to hear it. And it really is because John and I were big Two Boy Army fans back when we first met. But that also got us working on some more material. So right now we're working for maybe an EP. We thinking about summer on Funeral Party Records. It depends on how quickly we work and what develops, but maybe it might be more than an EP. But what we're working for right now is a 6-song EP. We're finishing up song 3. I don't work like I used to work. We used to throw music out left and right, but life catches up with you, and it's harder for me now to work on. I think it's because I'm quite a bit more anal retentive, and I literally will work on a song for weeks just trying to get little tiny things that probably most people wouldn't notice right, and even then I'll go back and fiddle with it. So that's one thing that we're working on, and I think we'll probably do some more at-home performances on the acoustic guitar, and when COVID ends, if we might even think about going to do some small-scale acoustic shows. I think the ship has sailed on the full electric shows. The band members are spread out all over the country, and I'm sort of over depending on technology for the shows. In the 90s, we always had a DAT player, and I'm just not interested in playing along with files or tapes anymore. And so doing a full-fledged LYCIA show just doesn't seem possible because just the staging of it. And, I don't want to compromise. In the 90s, we always had to dumb down our show a bit. I'd want to do it in its full glory. And since we can't do it, I think it's better just to go and do the acoustic shows, which we can fully realize. I mean, because we've had offers to do, like, go over to Europe and do Cold in its entirety. But I mean, we've got family and jobs.
Yeah.
Who can sacrifice a lot, because it'd be a lot of work. It'd be as much work as recording a new album, but sort of condensed and finding people on, it's difficult. So this is, the acoustic thing really is our best bet for getting out there. And so if COVID was over, when COVID is over and things are more normal, we might do sporadic out-of-town shows and just see how it goes. But if not, we'll do these things at home and hopefully still do some recording now and then. And because I tell you, after Line That Connects, I thought I was done. After In Flickers, I thought I was done. And going back farther, I mean, I can tell you the last LYCIA albums. Day in the Star Corner was the last LYCIA album. Cold was the last LYCIA album. Tripping Back into Broken Days was the last. I mean, it's a common thing where you finish an album, you burn out, you need recharge, and then a year later, suddenly you feel enthused again. So I don't know what the future holds, but I would suspect that there will be probably music still trickling out until I'm no longer around or unable to do it.
Well, I suspect no matter what, you'll always have an audience.
I'm thankful of that. I want to thank everybody for supporting us over the years. I feel very fortunate for that. And we're very thankful for it. So thank you all for supporting us. You know, if it wasn't for all this good support, my insecurities probably would have taken over, and I would have just, I'd be some disgruntled worker someplace. And so thank you all.
You got one more song in you?
Well, let's see. Let me get a little space here. This song has been a real regular in every set we've ever played, and it's from The Burning Circle. And I don't know why this song is a regular song, but it is. We played this at Roseland Ballroom in a very different version. And we've, if we ever play an acoustic set, this will be probably one of the main songs we play. Hopes and snow on this day. I'll wander around and get in my car and drive. Work so hard for everything that's not so. I'll just try and enjoy. Little rusty. I haven't played that for a couple months, so.
It was wonderful. I had to mute my microphone because my heat's kicking on, and I've got the old radiator heat, so I got clanging and banging and hissing and
Okay.
the usual. But yay, that was
The
fantastic.
rough voice that people were asking for. It's the same voice.
It is indeed, and I'm glad I finally got to hear it live after. When was that Roseland show? 95.
Yep.
Finally got to hear it live. Yay!
All right.
So thank you so much for being a guest, and hopefully Mad Dog, aka Candy, will be back up and running soon enough, and we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about the quantum physics and metaphysics of it all.
All right. All right. If that happens and I'm rambling, just go with it.
Oh, trust me. Watch a couple of our episodes.
All right.
We're
Thanks
really
for
good
having
train of thought.
me.
So thank you everybody for coming. This has been Mike VanPortfleet from LYCIA, and we'll put all the links and stuff in here, and I'll see if I can get the recording of this and also get it onto our YouTube channel as well. But this was a live feed for Facebooks. So thanks for coming.
All right.
It was wonderful talking.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.